Welcome to Real Leaders with Roshini, the podcast with real talk, real questions, real insight, and we hope real inspiration for real. We're here at Capitol Grill in downtown Minneapolis. My guest today is Jana Shortal. She is host of Breaking the News on Care TV, the NBC affiliate in the Twin Cities. She's no stranger to the media or her fans, and in 2019, she was featured on CNN, The Today Show, and TNT. Jana, it's been a big year.
It has been a blessed year, a big year, and an exhausting year. Yes.
You know, and that's what I've sort of, as I've watched you on these different platforms and seen the interviews, always you have so much energy, but do they wear you out?
Do I have energy right now? Because if I have it, I want you to tell me where it is in me. I think that I have the energy when I need to, but that's only because that's what I was trained to do in television, right? You know, it's just like being an actor or in any job you have, or you have a presentation. You really, once you get on that stage or once the interview starts, something happens in your body. It's just adrenaline. Leading up to it, it's nerves. Then you have the adrenaline, and then you have the aftermath, which is just this emotional fatigue, because a lot of what I've been sharing has been deeply personal and stuff I never talked about, or if I did so with humor or some sort of self-deprecation, so I didn't really have to go in deeper. And I've learned, being on this side of the microphone, that that's not what interviewers want. They want to ask harder questions.
Well, right. And as a journalist, you're used to being the one to tell the story and ask the questions. And so much of 2019 for you was being asked questions, probing questions into your personal life, into your sexuality, into what you wear, how you think. I mean, that you don't even get that personal with some of the people you interview. So what was that like?
Yeah. As you know, when you interview someone, you're usually interviewing them about something, or if it's about themselves, they've done something extraordinary, right? And I hadn't done anything, in my opinion. I was just living and being me, and I had been doing that for 41 years. So for that to all of a sudden become notable to some, and just how I looked when I did it, or what I was saying, or how I was saying it, at first it's super flattering, right? You're like, oh, thank you. Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you. And then, not that it never wasn't flattering, but then it became almost like a form of therapy that I was going through, but I was going through it publicly.
Very publicly.
Yeah.
And it lives on, right? Once it's a URL, it's not going to ever go away.
Sure. And through this journey, I would say the biggest blessing has not been, you know, the pats on the back or getting to go to the Today Show, which was super cool.
I mean, it looked like you were having fun. I know you took your producer with you, Nikki.
And my sister and my girlfriend.
Yeah. So you looked like you were having fun. Lots of posts on social.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm still doing all of that because that's kind of part of my job. So I'm doing my job and they're doing their job at the same time, right? It's all media. And so we're like swimming in a very small pool together at the same time.
Do you feel like they gave you the experience that you try to give people who come into your studio on Breaking the News?
You know, that's a great question, and it's one, Roshini, that I don't know. And what I did learn from this is how much responsibility we have as question askers to the person sitting across from us. They are giving us a part of themselves that is just, yes, words and time, but it matters. And especially if we're asking them about something personal. We ask people to talk to us in some of their darkest moments, or when something is very difficult or challenging is happening to them, right? And then when we're done, we're done. And then they get up and walk back out into the world. But what I learned is when the person being asked questions gets back up and walks back into the world, they're still holding that conversation because they know that you're going to put that conversation out into the world, and it's vulnerable and it's real. And you go through so many different things. Again, it's kind of like being in a therapist's office, only the therapist session is going to be broadcast to the world.
Absolutely. And now with social media, even more so than just having been on TV, which for decades is big enough, and that video lives on, or on the radio, that audio lives on. But now with podcasts and social media and images and Insta movies, it gets a little overwhelming.
Sure. And you wonder, especially, it sounds strange, but a lot of what I was talking about was just my life. So it wasn't like I was going to get it wrong, because it's my life. So I answer questions about how I feel or what my experience has been, sure. So different than journalism in terms of like making sure that I'm checking my sources. I am the source. It's such a strange, surreal experience. But you also, or I should say, but I also had many experiences throughout where I was hearing from so many people about what I was saying and how it was resonating with them, that they could hold up a mirror in their life and saying, I know what she's talking about, which was an incredible gift and a heavy one too. You didn't want to disappoint anybody. You didn't want to be a mirror for someone else and fail, or be something that they couldn't identify with, or that they saw as, oh, well, she went and did these things, but it didn't really work out.
Jana, you've interviewed so many people, but in your life as host of Breaking the News, a little different kind of show, because you can get editorial, you can share opinion, you get to go deeper with your subjects. How has that changed up, perhaps, your thought of yourself as a journalist in the first place?
Yeah, I think that word, like many words, has definitions that have been established, right? This is what it, just like, here's what it means to be male, here's what it means to be female, here's what it means to be Muslim, and it's a single track definition. Journalism, I feel like, different but same, is that it has to be done one way. And I don't believe that to be true. I think that there's a lot of gray area in terms of when we talk about opinion journalism or platform journalism, or and hopefully, I think that the problem has been is that the audience may not know the difference. And I think you need to be very clear about what you're doing. And if you're not, that can be problematic. You know, we see cable news channels that switch from daytime programming to primetime programming, but that switch is a big editorial switch too.
It's a big switch, and I don't know that the general public really understands that.
I don't think they do, in some way, shape, or form. I think I knew as a kid watching the Today Show, for example, that was not really a news program. They'd have kind of like a 4-minute segment where Ann Curry would come on and be very serious, and then it would go back to Al cooking cookies or something like that and telling me the weather. I knew that in my brain, and I don't know that I needed to be told that then. I thought that was an example in our past of when you saw something like that. And then the evening news, you know, you kind of had an expectation, or the newspaper, and you had an expectation. But today, I feel like we have so many outlets out there, social media included, and then people are just reading what is being shared by their friends or family or coworkers and not really looking at the URL or not figuring out what is that exactly? You know, if it's from a magazine, well, it's like, well, maybe that's something a little more down the lane of those subscribers. So for me, I think what happened at the beginning of Breaking the News was, I'm like, wow, hall pass for life. Get to do all sorts of things. And I want to know now, and I want to believe now, and I do believe, I should say, that this comes with great responsibility. Getting a hall pass to say, like perhaps yesterday, let's do a story about equal pay and what the women's national soccer team is fighting for with soccer, or with USA Soccer. Do so, but make sure that if you want to do an editorial, you better know it better than anybody. Before you go and start saying, here's what I think about this publicly on a platform where you have built trust, you better dot your I's and cross your T's in a way that is different from just regurgitating general news facts.
And that's a really good tip. Now, I know on social media you're well followed across your different platforms. When do you decide to engage? Because sometimes people will respond or say something that's snippy. It's worth engaging, but sometimes it's not. So what's your litmus test for that?
I never engage in something that I don't have kind of a guttural response to. In that same vein, I have thousands of them that I don't engage with because sadly, I think I have learned, you have learned, many have learned, there are topics on social media where it's just not worth it. And what are you contributing? I like to think sometimes in our business of journalism too, and it sounds kind of lofty, and I'm not comparing, I just use this as something that's helpful. When we talk about do no harm in medicine, right now we live in a very divisive society, and if I just bring out some hot take or something that I think is clever or funny, but does it really add to the conversation? No. It's just me kind of showing off that I said something clever, right? I try to not do that anymore. Now, will I try to be clever or funny in my tweets when I'm talking about an issue I care about? Absolutely. Or when I'm responding to someone that has not been very respectful towards me. Do I try and get a joke in there and then build it up with facts? Of course I do. But I don't want to engage in every conversation just to be in every conversation. I no longer need that. And I think social media, too, could use a little less hot takes and a little more empathy. It's a lot of talking and not much listening.
What's your advice to people out there who aren't in media, who do engage on social, if they are going to engage? What do you want them to think about before they type and press post?
I can just say from my experience, I have been there. And you can take your blood pressure to a level that your doctor will not advise within 45 seconds of reading something. And then you click your take. And then you find yourself hitting refresh on your phone. I do it too. I've lost nights of my life after my show or I go home to quibbling and arguing with people that, number one, I do not know. I know nothing about. I don't know where they live. I don't know if they're real, if they're a bot. What am I doing? That was a perfectly good walk I could have gone on. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean.
And so I would just advise, like, just be careful. It's a great tool, but it is definitely addictive. And it is definitely not something that if you are going to your partner or your family member and your head is hot and you're supposed to be sitting down to supper with your family and you're like, blah, 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 said this, and you don't even know them. You know what I mean? It's just not, it's not worth your rise in blood pressure at that point. What can you do on social media to engage in conversation but keep it respectful? It's a challenge, right? And I think that we should kind of all try and challenge ourselves to do that more. Let's engage in a level that's respectful. What would it look like?
I love that. I think that's great advice. You have become one of the most well-known media figures in the Twin Cities, and now, you know, you have these national entities that are also sharing your story. What is that like? And do you sometimes want to just hide, or are you loving it?
All of the above. There's no other way to describe it other than it's surreal. A friend of mine told me I needed to start reading. I'm going to get his name wrong. Is it Eckhart Tolle?
Yeah.
Am I saying it correctly? Okay. Yeah. Because I've developed in the last several months this irrational fear that too many things are going right in my life and something bad needs to happen. Like, I don't deserve this.
That's kind of a glass half empty sort of attitude.
I mean, it's the cynical journalist in me because I just don't believe that I'm special. And this is not, I'm not going to just pile on in my general self-deprecation, but I think that this is a real emotion that has been the result of having that much attention, which is very strange for a person that always sought attention, right? I wanted to be, pick me, show me, take my picture. I want to be the anchor. I want to do this stuff. And then attention comes, and it comes in a very personal way, and I'm grateful for it. So grateful that I worry, right, that I don't deserve it. It's the old imposter syndrome kind of thing coming back to knock on the door of like, psh, this is all a facade. No one's going to care about you. And that's a dangerous thing that happens to people, I think, when this happens to them. And so I have all this empathy for actual famous people now. I'm like, wow, what is that like? Because it's a lot, you know, and people expect a lot out of you, and they send you emails and direct messages on different forms of social media, you know, asking for help or telling you very personal things about themselves. And I am humbled to get those. I just don't know what to do with all of them. You know what I mean?
Well, I'm going to tell you, you do deserve it. And I will quote famous Minnesotan Bob Dylan, who was once asked, did he ever think, and I won't have the exact quote, but did he ever think this would be how his life would go? And he said something like, I always knew I was meant to do something great. And I thought, wow, when I read this, and the exact quote is what I read, and I don't remember the exact quote, but I thought, wow, he said it in a way that you can own your wow. Mm-hmm. You can absolutely know inside that you have the gift to tell certain stories, and that is okay. And if others want to feature that and showcase that, that's sharing your gift with the world.
Sure.
Right? And so I hope that you never feel like there's any imposter syndrome going on, because there's a reason why you were selected as the one,
Sure. And I think what got confusing about it is when I sit and speak to you, or I sit and speak to the high school teacher I spoke to yesterday, who's doing incredible work with young people to teach them music in an adaptive way so everyone's included. That's when I know I'm doing what I always wanted to do, what I was fortunate to find a space to do, and I'm good at it. The other stuff is talking about how I dress, how I look, the way I talk, the way I present myself. That's harder, right? Because I was participating in media and television media for 20 years before, and that was what was holding me back in some spaces. And for it to be popular now is like living in the upside down. That's what I'm talking about in terms of
interesting.
Same with who I love and how I love. That was not okay in this country until recent history.
And not even that recent.
Even that recent, and still not okay in some states. And so when you're going through this change where you're not only not shunned, but you're applauded, it's beautiful and scary.
Kind of surreal.
Very surreal. You're like, is this really happening? Is this really happening, and how? And all of these things were not possible years ago, and will they be taken away? So it's that kind of thing. But at the same time, realizing the responsibility that comes with being someone who presents like I do and looks like I do, and what that looks like to the next generation and the generation behind them. And that's who, when I talk to them, and when their parents call, or their grandparents, or their aunts and uncles, and say, keep going, that's how I know I was meant to do this.
And that's the thing. You don't always know all the people you're affecting to the degree you're affecting.
Right.
So it is nice when you hear from some of them, because it probably helps propel you forward, or it gives you some relief that it's okay.
We all have that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a local news person, so I'm pretty easily accessible to folks around here. And most often I'll respond because I'm not an actual famous person. But we have people that we admire, right?
Right.
Don't we?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe today there are hundreds of thousands of girls in America that look at Megan Rapinoe and say, or look at any number of the women on the U.S. national team, or who knows, you pick them, and they admire them, and they want to go do something great that day. They're going to work harder that day. They're going to do something. And Megan Rapinoe probably will never know all of those people, but she matters to them. Now, I'm a teeny tiny sliver of that. And so knowing that everybody has to have somebody to look to and say, I want to do that. We've all done it. And that's why I think my story is not that special. It's just kind of an every person story, that we can all identify with being the underdog at some point in our life. We can all identify with having self-doubt. We can all identify with walking into a workplace or a hallway in the 7th grade and we're like, uh-oh, I didn't wear this right. This is not what you're supposed to do. Everybody has that story.
Absolutely. And yet there are some things that are very of the day, or of regular folk about you, which is that your perfect day starts with a great cup of coffee.
It does.
And I'm sure a lot of your viewers can relate to that.
Oh, I love coffee so much.
Do you have a brand that you like?
Lately, it's been anything Peace Coffee, and I just learned late in life. I know this is hard to believe, but I did not know that light roast has more caffeine than dark roast.
I did not know that.
Right?
You would
Did you
never.
know this?
It's counterintuitive.
Yes. I was darkening it up as much as I possibly could, thinking, yeah, pump it through my veins. And then somebody at Peace Coffee told me that, and I'm, record scratch, what? So for that tidbit of information, it's a lot of Peace Coffee.
A lot of Peace Coffee.
Yeah.
That keeps you going.
Yeah.
Is there a song that keeps you going, or that might be Jana Shortal's theme song?
No. Music is... There can be nights where I need it to be classical, and a lot of classical, because I don't want any more words, or mornings. There can be days or nights where I need it to be rap, or I need it to be 80s hair metal bands. There are certain songs that, yes, that we all have that I think that will take us back to who we are. For me, I think that will always be, because I love my parents so much and my family and where I grew up, there will always be songs by Joni Mitchell, Paul Simon, Simon and Garfunkel. Rainbow Connection is probably the biggest one by Kermit the Frog.
Such a sweet song.
It's the best song ever. If you listen to the words, I mean, that song is, Kermit's lonely in a pond and he's wondering about the meaning of life. And it's really great stuff. And some days when I'm really struggling, or it gets to be too much, or the trolls cut a little too deep, it's Rise Up by Audra Day.
I like it. So you've got quite a range. Quite a range
I
there.
hope we all do.
It's a great musical library. I know that you wrote your own biography and illustrated it at age 7. How might that 7-year-old illustrate a new version of the memoir?
Man. There's a violent chapter in that biography that I really wish never went to print, but since I wrote the book in pencil, it went to print.
At age 7.
At age 7. I was really mad at my next door neighbor, apparently, at the bus stop, and I talked about beating her up with my lunchbox. It was dark. Chapter 3 is dark in the story of my life.
You let those kinds of feelings go.
Yeah, I'm like, oh my goodness. Yeah, no, I can't even kill a bug. What would it look like now? There are parts of it that I don't think would be that different. That book is very comical to folks that come over to my home for them to read. It's a quick read. The pictures are, pretty great. I taped them all in with Scotch tape, just photographs of me in school. But it talks a lot about skateboarding and how much I love my teachers and wanting to be something great.
Well, I think you've landed in a lot of great places and great states of being. Congratulations, and we look forward to the next decades, Jana Shortal.
Thank you.
Until next time, keep it real.